Estimados colegas,
Colleagues, let's commence our night session. Black Friday night.
I hope that dinner make a different effect than lunch for this session. So, we have in front of us, well, already in the website, 8 L documents that we should address at this session. And let's start with consideration of document L2. And then at the end, we'll go back to L1. And then we will proceed with agenda items 10 and 12 on organizational matters and so on, and new members of Substa Bureau. So it's still some business tonight. So let's go to document L2 on possible elements of work on the links between nature and culture in the post-2020. You will recall that we had a robust discussion on L2 yesterday, resulting in an informal group who work to find a way forward. The text before us has benefit from that discussion, but unfortunately we still have paragraphs in square brackets, paragraphs 2A and 2C in this section for the conference of the parties. I'm very reluctant to send bracket text to the COP, given the workload of COP 15. Are there any additional views from the floor concerning the retention or deletion of bracket text paragraphs? So I open the floor for good news. One by one, please. So I see no request from the floor. Then I submit for adoption document L2. Can we adopt it? I see no request. Brazil, Argentina, you have the floor, followed by Brazil.
Gracias. Translation. Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for clarity, we're going with the brackets. Thank you.
Brazil. New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologise that we were a bit slow off the mark here. Just to record that we would strongly support the deletion of the paragraphs in brackets and the brackets in this recommendation. As you say, we should aim not to have brackets in a Substa recommendation. We also consider that these particular paragraphs are not particularly appropriate to consideration by Substa. They could be taken up by the SBI or by the COP, and there will be further opportunities to do that. Our strong preference is that we respect the work of the working group on Article 8J on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, New Zealand. Yes, there are independent bodies in our convention. This is focused on scientific and technical and technological advice. Does anyone oppose to deletion of 2A and 2C? So I have Iceland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to support the statement just made by New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm asking if there's anyone opposing to deletion of 2A and 2C. Bosnia Herzegovina, followed by Brazil. Bosnia? You asked for the floor?
Sorry, Chair, it was mistake. I haven't been here on my place.
Brazil?
We would like to maintain both 2A and 2C. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then Australia?
Thank you, Chair. I won't take long. I'd just like to strongly reiterate the comments of New Zealand and also the comments we've made throughout the day regarding the advice that's appropriate from this body. Thank you. We recommend also supporting deleting the two bracketed paragraphs.
Thank you. Norway and Denmark, and then I'll make a recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. We'd also like to support the intervention from New Zealand and Australia. We'd like to delete the bracketed text. Thank you.
Denmark?
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief. Also, Denmark wants to strongly support the interventions by New Zealand and Australia and see the bracketed text deleted. Thank you.
Is also Finland same direction? I see noting. So we will keep 2A and 2C in brackets. So I submit this document for adoption. I see no more requests for the floor, so L2 is adopted. Now, next we look at document L3, new and emerging issues relate to conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. It has no brackets. I submit for adoption document L3. I see no requests from the floor, so L3 is adopted. Now we go to document L4 on biodiversity and climate change. we still have brackets in this document on page 2, page 3, 4, and 5. Do we see any suggestions moving forward? Let's start with page 2. I open the floor for comments on page 2, paragraph 8. Any suggestion? Argentina?
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairman. We strongly support deleting the brackets from this paragraph. We think that would be wholly appropriate. Thank you.
Give the floor to Finland.
Thank you. This 8 is very difficult to accept as it is formulated. It includes issues that is not scientifically and technically, or the rationale for this is, and it includes even, should I say, highly political issues at this stage. So we cannot at this stage accept this kind of formulation, unfortunately.
Canada?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We would like to support the views of the EU and would like to delete this paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I have a question to Canada. I don't see any co-chair of Substa, so I'm not aware of that. It's been a number of interventions on that sense. Just joking. Thank you. Norway?
Thank you, Chair. We'd also like to support the intervention made by Finland and Canada. We'd like to delete the para. Thank you.
Jamaica, followed by Spain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jamaica would like to retain paragraph 8. Thank you.
Spain, followed by Brazil.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chairman. We support Finland's proposal.
Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. I presume you know that we will be supporting Argentina and Jamaica. Thank you.
Italy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to support the position of Finland.
Okay. I have Belarus, Switzerland, and Morocco, and as we can see, we are on the same situation. There is no consensus on this, but there is a situation here. We cannot have any paragraph with brackets on the first section. I mean, we can have brackets for the COP, but not here. So we need to make an effort to move forward. We need flexibility and we need to focus in our mandate. So one possible way forward is to move this paragraph into the COP section where we can have brackets. I see Brazil noting, and I also see Argentina. Thank you very much. So we will move this to this section referring to the COP, so with brackets. So we will not entertain in that section. So we have a clean text until paragraph 12, who is referring to Substa deliberations and outcomes. Now I invite you to visit page 3. Wait a moment. Right. On page 2, on the first paragraph, on recognizing that biodiversity loss, there are some brackets at the end of paragraph of line 4 on those voluntary targets concerning the certification, land degradation, drought under the UN Convention of Combat Desertification. Any comments on that paragraph? I see France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. France had asked for this part to be in brackets, but we can agree to have them removed if we change the text to the language agreed under the UNCCD. And so we would propose
those voluntary land degradation neutrality targets under the UNCCD.
Is that formulation from France acceptable? I'd like to know if anyone is against the language proposed by France on paragraph start with recognizing. I see no comments, then is adopt. Now we move to page 3 at the very beginning. The paragraph starting with stressing, at the very end it's bracket on and will require transformative change. Any interventions on this paragraph? Morocco, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Before the paragraph in the French version, the fourth paragraph on page 3 in the French version, soutient le maintien. So there are brackets in that text at the end of this paragraph. To deliver the 2050 vision and living in harmony with nature. And there's a bracket after this. We must remove this section of the sentence, therefore.
Yes, Morocco, we are referring to the same paragraph, maybe because the English version is starting at the beginning of page 3, but this is exactly the brackets we are referring, and I'm looking for a possibility to don't send brackets to the COP. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This proposal on having and we require transformative change, I just want to say this is exactly the wording taken from chapter D from the IPPES report on transformative change, and we really would like to see that that it stayed in the text. So that's shortly what it's scientifically proved by the IPPES report in chapter D of the report. Thanks.
So this is in line with the report. So I'll ask is there any objection to delete brackets in this paragraph? Argentina?
Thank you, Chairman. As we said earlier, we think that any mention of transformative change would need to include the necessary means to bring about transformative change. So if we are not able to arrive at a consensus on that, then we think we should leave the brackets in. Thank you.
I have a suggestion. I hope it can flies. If we keep and will require transformative change, including means of implementation, is that something in between that can be an option? This is trying to address both concerns, and without going too specific into financial matters, but including means. It is implicit that the transformative change requires also means, but this is my proposal to you, in order to keep these elements together. Is this acceptable to all of you as a way forward? I give the floor to Brazil, followed by Norway.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know. I think at this late stage, are we going to go through the whole text of what we're proposing to COP? I think that if we just leave the 13 in brackets, then we can just go forth and discuss this at COP. Because at this point in time, I think everybody's tired. We just want to go home. We've had it. So I don't think we're going to get through these brackets as are, but I'm in your hands. I really think that we should just leave it and just go to the next L document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brazil, but can you respond to my offer as a compromise text? So maybe this can also facilitate other paragraphs that are referring to the same matter. So will require transformative change, including means of implementation. So this is something in between. We need flexibility for both sides. I know it's not the best language for some that they just want transformative change, and also from as Argentina and Brazil shows, I think that can be a good option. So I'd like to put it for your consideration again as a compromise. It's for all. It's not only one view. Do you believe it's feasible? Then I'll ask the others as well. Brazil, microphone to Brazil, please.
Thank you, Chair. Why don't we read both of them in brackets? I think at this point in time it's the best thing, because otherwise we will be giving wings to things that maybe we're not very comfortable with doing at this time.
Okay, I understand. Then I withdraw my suggestion. So we keep this paragraph with brackets as it is. So we should continue with next paragraph with brackets, which is the one starting with noting the large-scale deployment of intense bioenergy and so on. I would like to open for comments on this paragraph, starting with noting. I have Morocco, following Mexico.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm in your hands with regard to the modus vivendi you've put forward, and for which we would fully support. We would prefer have a bit of time. I know that we're tired, but I would hope we wouldn't have any brackets in the text we would put to COP. I would support your proposal, therefore, and just in the French version, we need to remove the term changement profond and replace it with the term changement transformateur. That's in the French version.
I'll ask the Secretariat to verify that all these matters relate to translation to French be right. The Secretariat?
So we will, of course, review all the comments made about the translation. So we take note of this this comment.
So I'd like to reiterate that regarding the first paragraph, page 3 in English, we adopted with brackets, and now I'm asking for comments on the paragraph with brackets that start with noting the large-scale deployment and so on. España.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairman. For the sake of reaching a better agreement, at least for this paragraph, we could delete the. I would like to propose text such as exists in the IBIS summary. Perhaps that would garner a better consensus. The paragraph would read in English.
Noting that land-based climate change mitigation activities can be effective and support conservation goals. It is recognized that the large-scale deployment of bioenergy plantations and afforestation of non-forest ecosystems can come with negative side effects for biodiversity and ecosystem functions. Y entonces sustituiría.
So that would completely replace the paragraph that's currently in brackets. That's our proposal. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, España. Usted se está refiriendo.
Thank you very much, Spain. We're just picking up here message 8 of the summary for policymakers from IBES that states textually what you have just read in terms of climate change mitigation activities.
It is known that large-scale deployment of bioenergy plantations and afforestation on non-forest ecosystems can come with negative side effects for biodiversity and ecosystem functions. Esto es una.
This is word for word substitution from the EBES. Is anybody opposed to this modification where we would replace this paragraph in brackets with the text that comes from the IBES assessment? Brazil?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I most certainly do not approve. Thank you.
Bueno, si no hay más
If there are no further requests on this paragraph, then it remains in brackets. Let's move on to page 4. Here we have brackets in paragraph 5. The second, further down it says, including existing new and updated nationally determined contributions. I believe this was Switzerland who made this suggestion, and I give the floor to Mexico. Thank you, Chairman. In the last paragraph we were talking about, I know we kept the brackets, but could we say vectors instead of sectors? And that was what we had originally requested.
Gracias, México. Es un error, ¿verdad?
Thank you, Mexico. That's a mistake, isn't it? Yes. Thank you.
Regresamos la discusión.
So let's go back to our discussion. Comments on the brackets in paragraph 5 on page 4. Norway, followed by Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to remove the brackets and keep the text as it is. This is repeating COP decision we had both in Cancun and in Egypt. So we think it's appropriate to refer to this text, and it's also, just to note, is also as appropriate, this text. Thank you very much.
Now I give the floor as appropriate to Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, but I have to maintain our position that since there is no clear IPCC methodology to have an idea what exactly is the effect of a nature-based solution on the climate, we cannot accept to make a reference to it. Thank you. And therefore, I would want to delete the text in the brackets.
Understand. Switzerland, Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to support the view of Norway and would very much like to remove the brackets here. We think it's particularly important given our renewed focus on collaboration and synergies with other conventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway, followed by Finland.
Thank you. We also would like to support Norway and Canada on this point. This is a quite important issue for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no more requests from the floor, so we adopt paragraph 5 with those brackets. Now let's move to paragraph 6b. We had a bracket on the phrase in the middle, including those from renewable energy transition. Comments on this paragraph 6b? Spain.
Thank you, Chairman. Spain would like to delete the brackets in this paragraph. However, if there's a completely negative interpretation of renewable energies, then we could leave the text as is and compensate for this reading, which is not our reading, but we would propose for the paragraph starting with emphasizing after it says that climate change should essentially be mitigated through the reduction of anthropogenic emissions. We should add in English
and the significant importance of renewable energy to achieve it. Con eso entendemos que
and with that, we think that would clear up the doubts about the paragraph that's in brackets. That should dispel some of those concerns, and then we could delete those brackets and keep the wording as is. Thank you.
A ver, España, si entiendo bien.
Thank you, Spain. If I understand what you're proposing is that we go back to the preamble paragraphs. Is that correct? And we would make an amendment. So we'd go back to paragraph, the paragraph where it says emphasizing. Could you read, so the amendment would be, so we'd change that paragraph and then we'd, sorry, Spain, could you explain again? Thank you.
esa enmienda sería.
So we'd make this amendment and then we would keep the text without the brackets in the paragraph that we're talking about.
Tu propuesta.
Okay, so then could you explain how we would change the preamble paragraph? That's page 3, third paragraph down. So
Primarily be mitigated by reducing anthropogenic emissions, coma, y aquí vendría la adición.
And here we would insert
Significant importance of renewable energy to achieve it, coma, y continuaría como está.
and then the rest as is.
Muy bien, so este es
Okay, so that's a combined solution. We would be removing the brackets from paragraph 6b in the body of the text, and in exchange, we would go back to this preambular paragraph on page 3, third paragraph, emphasizing that
of renewable energy to achieve it. ¿Alguien se opone?
Is anybody opposed to this suggestion?
Bélgica.
Belgium, then Argentina, and New Zealand.
Mr. Chair, just want to make sure I understood it well. The idea would be to keep the text in paragraph 6b without the brackets and add the paragraph above. Yeah, then we can support it, because I read it the way Spain reads it, that in paragraph 6b, when we talk about both positive and negative effects, both of them can refer to renewable energy. So that fits with the preamble paragraph. Thank you.
Así es.
All right, Argentina. Thank you, Chairman. We are very grateful to Spain for their suggested amendment, but I think if we identify one sector, we have to identify all of them. So we cannot support that position. Of course, we're not opposed to including the preamble paragraph, if that is the wish, but I think that we had already agreed on that part. Thank you. Yes, but that would just be if we took out the brackets in paragraph 6b and kept the text as is in that paragraph. So you are not in favor of deleting the brackets, Argentina, on the paragraph 6b? Is that the case?
Argentina?
Argentina. No, it's just that there would have to be an extensive list of all the sectors to consider. But I don't think now is the time to do that. We suggested that, and the suggestion was not accepted in the plenary. Thank you. Thank you, Argentina, New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. We just had a small wording suggestion for the new proposal in the preambular paragraphs, but if that's not going to be acceptable, then we won't bother. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. So I see no more requests from the floor regarding paragraph 6b. So we adopt this with brackets as originally. Now let's move to paragraph 7. We have brackets on C, which I believe should be A, and D, which I believe should be B. We don't have on E, that should be C. So I call for comments on 7C, that should be A. Finland.
On C, 7C, I just wonder about the brackets, because I thought this was accepted in its entirety, except for the first, especially to developing country parties. I thought the brackets were around that and not around the whole paragraph. And I think it makes a huge difference where the brackets are. So just for clarification, in my recollection, the brackets should be only around especially to developing country parties and not around the 7C in its entirety. Thanks you. I'm getting tired.
I'll ask the secretary to verify that. I'm also very tired. And you know, it was a very nice party downstairs. Okay, seems like you are right. The Secretariat believe that was the brackets were on the whole paragraph and is only on the section referring to especially to developing country parties. Now we give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think my recollection is slightly different. I believe that my delegation asked to put brackets on the whole paragraph, not just around the, especially to developing country parties, because as Finland said, and I quite agree with her, it changes substantially what we're saying here. So I really think we need to leave the paragraph, the whole paragraph in brackets, and also. Considering that you like the music that's downstairs, could I make a suggestion? I don't think we're going to remove any of the brackets in the rest of the text, but I could be wrong. Maybe we can shelve this. We can have the this L4 approved just the first part, and if we have time at the end, then we come back and look at the rest of it under that impression, so that we go through all the other L documents, get them out of the way, and then we come back to this if anybody wants to, which I don't think so. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. So my understanding is that we keep brackets on 7, that should be A, and that should be B, right? Okay, let's not wait more time. The music is really nice downstairs. Now I'd like for comments on paragraph 8, and I hope we can have good news. But before I have Belgium.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry I have to make you a little bit less happy, because we are going to have to also put the brackets around, especially to developing country parties, because we understood it the way Finland understood it. And I would therefore like to have both brackets around the entire paragraph and within around the, especially to developing country parties. But I can give you some sneak peek. I will have a solution to remove some of the brackets at the end of the paragraph, at the document. So there is hope. Thank you.
Yes, I'm still optimistic. Yeah, we should maintain the party spirit. We'll keep a double set of brackets in 7C. That should be A, one for the full paragraph, and also another around especially to developing country parties, and we keep brackets to the whole subparagraph D, that should be B. And now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 8, encourage parties and invite other governments. That was a proposal from Mexico. Mexico has the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. For the sake of moving ahead and getting rid of the brackets, we would like to suggest a redraft of paragraph 8 as follows.
Encourage parties and invites other governments, relevant organizations, and stakeholders, including the productive and financial sectors, to consider the potential opportunities to reduce vulnerability to climate change, including through the use of ecosystem-based approach, with a view to reducing risk to these sectors and to facilitating coordinated actions to promote sustainable resources management. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. Could you please reread it at dictation speed, please, Mexico? Of course, thank you.
Encourage parties and invite other governments, relevant organizations and stakeholders, including the productive and financial sectors, comma, to consider the potential opportunities to reduce vulnerability to climate change, comma, including through the use of ecosystem-based approach, comma, with a view to reducing risk to these sectors and to facilitating coordinated actions to promote sustainable resources management. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairman.
Gracias, México.
Thank you, Mexico.
So I will read again. I hope it's a good formulation to everybody. For clarity, it encourages parties and invite other governments, relevant organizations, and stakeholders as it is, including, and we replace the private sector by productive and financial sectors, to consider the, and we strike out everything, options to reduce vulnerability to climate change, including through the use of ecosystem-based approach with a view to reduce risk to these sectors and to facilitate coordinate actions to promote sustainable resource management. I think it improves a lot. So I'd like to hear if we can go along with this new formulation. Brazil?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sorry to make your life more difficult, but both sentences, to me, they don't really make any sense because I can't imagine how a business, so I don't know, a food store, is going to implement an ecosystem-based approach. It doesn't really make any sense. Either we can put both paragraphs in brackets, one of the paragraphs, but I can't even think right now, but I can't go along with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. So since this paragraph was originally proposed by Mexico and now is amended by Mexico, we will keep the amended version of the Mexican formulation, which now sounds better to me, and for is easier to understanding in brackets, but the revised version for consideration at COP. Now let's move to paragraph 11A. Now I open the floor to comments on 11A. So there is no appetite to remove brackets. Then we adopt it with brackets. Now let's move to paragraph 11C. I give the floor to Belgium.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may recall, we asked for, because time was running out, we asked to bracket both C and D. because we didn't think this was within the mandate of Substa. We would be okay with releasing deleting the brackets around D, because it is about just supporting the initiatives. However, for C, we still don't think this is correct where it is, because we do not think that Substa should give advice to the COP to tell open-ended working group what to do, especially not when these things are already ongoing. So we would therefore like to make this into a separate paragraph 12 under the COP, and basically start the paragraph by saying appreciates the continued collaboration, and then the rest of the paragraph would stay the same. Because we do believe that Substa has the mandate to indicate to the COP that it appreciates the scientific work on this collaboration between Unfccc and the open-ended working group. And then it's good for the COP to appreciate it. And that's a different level of relationship. So we would be fine with that, and then we could remove the brackets around both C and D, which would now be the new 12. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Belgium, for the flexibility. So you accept to remove brackets on paragraph currently D, that will be C, and you are requesting to move C as a new paragraph 12, starting with I still not understanding my own writing. Appreciates the collaboration, continue collaboration with. That's what you asked, right? Okay. So with those amendments, we adopt document L4. Now let's move to L5, which it's a clean document. There's no brackets on it. So I submit for adoption document L5 in its entirety. I see no objections. Then document L5 is adopted. Now let's move to document L6. Let's start with, it has a bracket on paragraph 2 and another bracket on page 2 at the end on the English version. There's only 2 brackets which are pretty similar, I guess. Yes. So I open the floor for comments on paragraph 2 in page 1. Yes, my recollection is that those brackets were inserted by Brazil because they asked for time for consultations with capital. So I give the floor to Brazil to enlighten us in where we are.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we had requested that because when I read it, I don't really understand what it says. That was the main concern we had when we put the brackets around it. I can remove the brackets. I just don't understand what it says at all. I don't know if it's a formulation of who put it in originally, but I can't understand what it says. That's why I put the brackets around it.
Well, thank you very much for the removal. I assume this applies, is the same paragraph exactly in both places. Thank you very much for your flexibility. Then I'll put document L6 for adoption. I see no request from the floor. Then document L6 is adopted. Now on document L7, this is on technical and scientific cooperation. Before we start, I would like to invite a representative of the small group. I request to find a solution to preamble paragraphs 4 and 5 and bracket text in operative paragraph 3 to report back on the result of their discussions. I understand that Belgium will report back, so I'll give the floor to Belgium, please. Microphone to Belgium, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The drafting group, in a spirit of compromise, came up with text for the bracketed paragraph in the preamble and paragraph 3. We didn't touch the bracketed text on transformational change in paragraph 3 of the preamble. So the bracketed paragraph in the preamble will be replaced by the following paragraph. And I'll try to read in dictation speed. Recalling decision 1420, comma, in particular paragraph 3, comma, and noting the ongoing discussions on digital sequence information on genetic resources. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's for the preamble.
Thank you very much, and I thank to the group that worked on this. This is replacing the paragraph we have in brackets on the preambular section in page 1. Thank you very much. I hope this is acceptable for us. I see no comments on this. Thank you. This is adopted. And now we have brackets on the one start with before recognizing. Hold on, please. Okay, so to continue with the outcomes from the group that met, I will also ask you about the outcomes from paragraph 3 on page 1. Please, Belgium.
Okay, thank you. Okay, paragraph 3 will read as follows. Invites parties, comma, other governments and relevant organizations, comma, including members of the Consortium of Scientific Partners on Biodiversity, comma, to submit to the Executive Secretary, comma, by 20 January 2020, double dot or semicolon, I don't know how you say that in English. Then we get a bullet A, and that reads as follows: additional views and suggestions regarding the proposals referred to in paragraph 1 above, comma, including elements for technical and scientific cooperation, for enabling technology horizon scanning, comma, assessment and monitoring, comma, avoiding duplication of related technologies considered by the ATEC on synthetic biology, semicolon, and then bullet B, examples of effective institutional mechanisms, comma, partnerships, comma, networks, comma, and regional and sub-regional institutional arrangements, semicolon, and that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So we have two subparagraphs, two elements with the new formulation, recalling decision 1420, in particular paragraph 3, and noting the discussions of the and so on. Yes, so you have we have the formulation. I understand this is a consensus on the group. So I also submit for consideration the adoption with these modifications in paragraph 3 to replace brackets. I see no comments, so we adopt paragraph 3 as amended. Thank you to the group for releasing brackets in these two paragraphs. Now we go back to the third preambular paragraph that starts with recognizing. We have brackets on and transformational change. So I open the floor for comments on transformational change. I see no comments, and as you know, we need to have no brackets. We cannot leave brackets as an outcome from Substa. We can probably send some to COP, but not this case. So my proposal is to delete the text inside the brackets. I see no comments, so we adopt this paragraph without the text inside brackets. Thank you very much. With this, we have no more brackets. I don't know why, but then I invite the plenary to adopt document L7. I see no more requests, so document L7 is adopted. Yes, now we move to document L8. So this is okay, on page 1, paragraph 4, we have brackets there, but also it's a group that was working on this paragraph. So I like to invite the group that was working to have a solution. So I'll give the floor to Belgium.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, given the time we spent on this paragraph, it wasn't easy to reach it. So I think we may have a compromise because we're all equally unhappy, which is the characteristics of a good compromise. So if I can read it out, it would read, stresses the need for urgent action to address the drivers of biodiversity loss, as well as those of climate change and land degradation, in an integrated manner, in line with the findings of the IPBES Global Assessment to achieve the 2050 vision. If I can read it in dictation speed. So it would read, stresses the need for urgent action to address the drivers of biodiversity loss, as well as those of climate change and land degradation, in an integrated manner, in line with the findings of the IPBES Global Assessment, to achieve the 2050 vision. So it stays close to the original. But hopefully this is acceptable to the whole group. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Belgium and the group. It reduces a lot. The paragraph is very straightforward. So I submit the paragraph as amended for adoption, for approval. I see no comments, so it's approved as amended. Thank you very much. Now let's move to page. We have clean page 2. Let's go to page 3 in this section to the COP at the very end in the English version, paragraph 3. Urges parties to action. Are there any comments on this paragraph? To remove brackets. This is the last paragraph. This is the last operative paragraph. So as you can see, this paragraph is also included language at the end, referring inconsistent with Article 20 of the Convention and international obligations. So my invitation is to delete the brackets. Is any opposition to delete brackets on paragraph 3? Finland. This is a compromise formulation. Finland, or meanwhile Germany?
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification, when we were discussing the CRP, we thought that the brackets would go around the original para 3, and so that the addition at the end, starting with calling for the provision, I think this should be bracketed then as well, the last part. Thank you.
So if I understand, you don't like the compromise proposal, and you want to keep brackets on the whole paragraph and also at the end, starting where? Calling. Germany?
We were fine to keep the para as it was in the CRP without brackets, but now as this addition in the end is in, we would actually just keep the brackets at the end part, calling for the provision, if this is an option.
Thank you, Germany. So what I understand is you keep brackets only in the last part in the section saying calling for the provision of resources to developing countries in order to address such changes consistent with Article 20 of the Convention and consistent with international obligations, which was my suggestion, and to achieve the 2050 vision. Brazil? Now Brazil.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for putting in this paragraph that was contained a little bit of all the concerns that were expressed. If we are leaving the calling for provisions of resources to developing countries in brackets, then we need to have the whole Article 3 bracketed. Thank you.
Canada maybe can help us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's what I'm playing around with. I'm just reflecting back on the paragraph that I believe Belgium was able to craft in the Substa recommendation. That's very, very similar. That talks about, that stresses the need for urgent action to address drivers of biodiversity loss. So I'm wondering if we simplify this in a similar way. I'm still playing around with it, but basically it would be urges parties to take, and then it would continue with the same language that we have in the Substa recommendation. So it would be urges parties to take urgent action to address the drivers of biodiversity loss, as well as those of climate change and land degradation, in line with the global assessment of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services to achieve the 2050 vision, full stop. So we agreed to that, my understanding, in the Substa recommendation. Perhaps we can use that text as a way forward here under the draft COP decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada, for this intent. So I'd like to hear comments on Canada's proposal as well. Belgium.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, basically, that was also part of the discussions we've had, is that, as I said, nobody was particularly happy about the compromise we reached in the Substa recommendation, but we are very much aware that we can't have brackets in the Substa recommendation, so that's why we reached the agreement. But that was also under the understanding that the text in paragraph 3 would stay as it is, or as it was. So I would actually, I mean, I understand what Canada is trying to do, but I would actually suggest in this, to be able to move forward, that we leave both the entire paragraph 3 in brackets as well as the part in calling for the provision. So again, brackets within brackets, because I don't think we will be able to solve that here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to be practical, so I invite all you to adopt paragraph 3, all in brackets, with a second set starting in calling for the provision and ending with international obligations. So with this, I put for adoption. Alawi still wants the floor? Or can we along with the adoption? Thank you, Alawi. So I put document L8 for adoption. I'm sorry, Spain? Spain, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. In paragraph 11, according to my notes from the Secretariat's last reading, I had noted in the second line
drivers of biodiversity loss. Al menos es las notas que yo tomé.
That's what my notes say anyway. And now we don't see the word drivers in paragraph 11, page 2. And we would like for drivers to be inserted, drivers of biodiversity. This is our understanding of how this was agreed in the discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Spain, for pointing that out. Secretariat says you're right. That was a mistake in the drafting. Thank you very much. And with that correction, I would like to... Brazil?
La palabra.
Sorry, Chair. Could you just explain exactly what was proposed or amended? We didn't fully capture. Thank you.
Se refiere al comentario.
So Spain was saying, yes, we identified an error in paragraph 11, page 2. It's at the end of the second line, paragraph 11. It says baselines related to, and it should say drivers of biodiversity loss. So drivers of fell out of the text in the drafting of L8. So it's just an omission that we pointed out.
Que de hecho esa fue la solicitud que tuvimos.
Yes, that was a request from the co-chairs.
Fue un error involuntario de la Secretaría.
It was an involuntary error on the part of Secretariat.
Brasil?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I believe that also we had included in there, after baselines, baseline dates, and other related methodologies. Nobody had spoken anything about it. So we presumed that it was in the text, because there are other also methodologies that would help for species conservation. So it would read possible targets, indicators, baselines, base times, and other appropriate methodologies. Methodologies. Thank you.
Gracias, muchas gracias, Brasil. Efectivamente, la
Thank you very much, Brazil. Yes, indeed. The Secretariat tells me that this is indeed another error which has slipped in.
For the error in paragraph 11, Spain is correct that it should read related to drivers of biodiversity loss. In the original one, we had climate change, invasive alien species, and pollution, and then that got changed for drivers of biodiversity loss not addressed, and then that we realized that we haven't addressed any drivers for the thematic workshops, and so it just said drivers of biodiversity loss. So apologies for that error in paragraph 11. The elements that Brazil is referring to on baseline dates and other appropriate methods for monitoring changes in biodiversity is included in paragraph 13. It's on the very last line of page 2 in the English version. So just after the reference to the document symbol in 3, it says to prepare a document that identifies the range of relevant existing indicators, baselines, baseline dates, or other appropriate methods for monitoring changes in biodiversity, and so on. So that is captured in paragraph 13.
Thank you both, Spain and Brazil, to identify those mistakes, and thanks to Secretariat for making clarifications. We're going to be sure that this is being reflected correctly on these two paragraphs. Okay, can I try now for the third time? So I submit document L8 for adoption. Are you sure? I have no comments. No request from the floor, then document L8 is adopted. All right, now regresamos al punto de agenda 2.1.
Now we'll return to agenda item 2.1, relating to the election of officers. According to the organisation of work adopted at the plenary session, the first plenary session, we will return to this agenda item. You will recall that Monday last, we requested that the subsidiary body was to elect 5 new members to serve on the Bureau of Substa. for a term commencing at the end of the 23rd meeting. These new members will replace the outgoing members from Iceland, St. Lucia, Namibia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Maldives.
So I would ask the regions to indicate to us their nominations, and we'll do this in alphabetical order. So I give the floor to the representative of Africa.
From Africa, yes. Egipto tiene la palabra.
Egypt, you have the floor.
No está Egipto.
Egypt's not here.
But we have them, so okay. Wait.
Mientras invito a los representantes.
Well, as we invite the representatives from the various regions, they can get ready to announce their nominee for the Bureau.
Malawi tiene la palabra.
Malawi has the floor.
Yeah, for the African region, Namibia is being replaced by Seychelles.
Thank you very much. Namibia, I understand, is Mrs. Marie May Musungyale from Seychelles. Is correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Bureau. Now I give the floor to the representative of Asia Pacific, Maldives. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. From the Asia Pacific region, Maldives as the Bureau member and Korea as the alternate Bureau member will be replaced by Ms. Gwen Caesar from Palau. She is from the Ministry of Natural Resources, Environment and Tourism of Palau, and she has been the representative of COP Bureau for COP14 before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we welcome Ms. Gwendolyn Caesar from Palau. Now I give the floor to Belarus on behalf of the Central and Eastern Europe region.
Thank you, Chair. After the regional meetings of the countries of Central Eastern European region, we nominate for a second term Ms. Senka Barudanovic from Bosnia and Herzegovina. She's a high-level specialist with significant experience under the Convention, particularly in Substa. You know her very well, and we believe that her work at a second term would be very useful for our region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Belarus. We know very well Senka is a former Substa chair, and it's going to be a pleasure to continue working with her. Now I give the floor to St. Lucia. From Grulac, yes. Or Antigua? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. The representatives from Grulac will remain the same. From St. Lucia, the main candidate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This means we will continue working with our colleague Adams Toussaint from St. Lucia. Now I give the floor to Iceland on behalf of WIOC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The new representative for the Schuskens part of the WIOC group will be Tia Stevens from Australia. And since Australia is not a member to the Cartagena or Nagoya Protocol, we will have Gaute Voigt Hansen from Norway as an alternate bureau member. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So we also welcome Tia Stevens from Australia and also Gaute from Norway. Welcome. So the bureau member is duly elected. And I like this opportunity to congratulate all bureau members. I wish them success in the work. We're gonna have to work hard for Substa 24. Now we have reached to agenda item 10 on other matters. So I open the floor for any other matters to be raised. I don't have any requests from the floor. Now we come to agenda item on adoption of the report. We come to document Substa 23L1, which is the draft report of the 23rd meeting of Substa. The document was distributed, and I hope that you all had a chance to read it. Now I now invite the rapporteur, Mr. Larbi Zvei from Morocco, to introduce the document. Larbi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Document Substa 23L1 contains summaries of the statements made during the meeting and matters regarding organization of the meeting. As rapporteur, I can state that I have indeed examined the report, and I have assured you that I have found it to be accurate. It picks up all of our debates in our meetings and our sessions and all the presentations that were made. I indeed therefore find it to be accurate. I'm submitting it for adoption with the understanding that today's proceedings and approved changes will, of course, be incorporated into the final version of the report that will be made available to you shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This concludes this item. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zvei. So I propose that we review the report page by page. Any comments on page 1? I see none. Comments on page 2? I see no request from the floor. Page 3? No request. Page 4? No request. Page 5? No request. Page 6? No request. Page 7. No request. Page 8. No request. Page 9. No request. Page 10. Denmark.
Thank you, Chair. I just noticed a small typo in paragraph 63. There's a reference to the country Denmark. I believe that currency is obsolete, so I would probably read Denmark. Thank you.
All right. No more Denmark. Thank you, Denmark. With that amendment, can we adopt page 10? I see no more requests. Now let's move to page 11. Mexico.
Thank you, Chairman. In paragraph 69, Mexico is not included in the drafting group, and we did participate, so we would appreciate being added to the list of countries that joined the small drafting group. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mexico. Denmark again.
Thank you, Chair. As with Mexico, we also participated in the drafting group and would like to have that noted. Thank you.
Denmark with N. Right. So page 11, no more comments. Page 12. No comments. Page 13. No comments. Page 14. No comments. So I submit for adoption document L1 with changes approved. Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm just wondering, when would I have the opportunity to either make a statement and have it recorded in the minutes, or just send it in to the Secretariat to have it recorded? But I look at your for your orientation on what to do, but we needed to make a statement, and I'd like to have it recorded. Thank you.
Yes, Brazil, so if you want that your statement be recorded in the report, this is the time to do it. Please go ahead.
Thank you. You'd like me to read it out? Okay, thank you. I don't know where we would put it, probably under the L8 CDEC, but I think it's very important, and I'll read it out. Brazil underlines that the Annex 1 to the L8 lacks balance on capturing the positions submitted by the parties. We understand that this is part of an ongoing negotiation, and we look forward to rectifying this. Nonetheless, we would like to have this statement recorded in the report of the meeting, and we also note that there has been an attempt to alter the meaning of benefit sharing, which under the convention relates to genetic resources, when it was joined with a slash to ecosystem services, and thus signifying it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. That will record in the minutes in the report. Now I give the floor to Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you adopt the report, in paragraph 89, Jamaica had made a statement under this agenda item and were not included in the list. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jamaica. So Jamaica will be included in paragraph 89. So with this, I submit document L1 as amended for adoption. I see no more interventions, then L1 is adopted. Now, before I come to closure of the meeting, I have the pleasure to announce the winners of the poster session on sustainable wildlife management. The winners were selected based on the poster's overall contribution to the objectives of the convention, relevance to the theme, overall design, structure, and content. I invite the representatives of the winning posters to come to the podium and to receive their awards. I also invite Ms. Ilham Mohammed from Maldives and co-chair for the agenda item on sustainable wildlife management to give the awards to the winners. So, first winner is on the poster on Stop Animal Selfies from the Ministry of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. Is anyone from Costa Rica here? Can somebody go downstairs and look for Costa Rica in the party?
The party.
Next one is on Bighorn sheep in Sonora, Mexico, a tale of recovery due to its sustainable use, from the Scientific Authority of Mexico, CONABIO. Next winner is on Cameroon's Sustainable Wildlife Management Outlook, Minedep, Cameroon. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big round of applause to the winners. Congratulations. Now we move to item 12, closure of the meeting. It's a great sadness that we learned that about the passing away of Ms. Romana Alejandra Barrios Perez in May 2019. Can you read it for me? I can. Please.
So Mrs. Barrios was a former Access and Benefit Sharing National Focal Point of Mexico. A very enthusiastic and loved colleague who was dedicated to the objectives of the convention and its protocols. Over the years, she contributed to advance the discussions on a number of issues related to the convention and its protocols. Her dedication to biodiversity, expertise, spirit of collaboration, and enthusiasm were appreciated by all of us. She was instrumental in reaching consensus in many policy discussions. In her capacity as a co-chair, she led the meeting of the ad hoc technical expert group on digital sequence information held in 2018 to a successful outcome despite the sensitivities and challenges of such a complex issue. On a personal level, she will be missed by those that had the privilege to meet her. We will remember Mrs. Barrios fondly and include her and her family in our thoughts and prayers.
Thank you very much. Now I have the pleasure to invite Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Remba, officer in charge, to address the meeting.
First, may her soul rest in peace. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the close of the 23rd meeting of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice, our Substa 23. Your collaboration, flexibility, and perseverance, along with tenacious work over some late evenings, including tonight, have led us to this successful conclusion. Your work here has contributed not only to advancing progress on various streams of ongoing work under the Convention on Biological Diversity, but also to strengthening the scientific base for the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This week has illustrated the critical role Substa plays in ensuring that all work under the CBD is underpinned by sound science. As we work to develop the framework for the future of the world's biodiversity, this role is as important now as it perhaps has ever been. The fluctuating temperatures outside have also reflected the pace of our discussions throughout this week. There must be no doubt in anybody's mind that we will face challenging but necessary discussions if we truly wish to put the world on a path to sustainable future for nature and people. And for me personally, it was especially impressive this week to witness the nuts and bolts workings of the Substa from behind the scenes. The advice we have provided to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, in particular on the evidence base, the mission, the topics, 4 targets, as well as the process for developing indicators, provides essential guidance in the development of the Zero Draft. This will no doubt give us a strong foundation for the second meeting of the working group scheduled for February incoming. Furthermore, the findings of key scientific reports from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, as well as the International Plant Protection Convention, provided a robust basis for discussions on biodiversity and climate change, during which you stressed the urgency of taking actions to address the inseparable challenges of biodiversity loss and climate change, including by scaling up the implementation of the ecosystems-based approaches to climate change adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk reduction. You have acknowledged the important work of the ad hoc open-ended working group on Article 8J on the links between nature and culture by further considering increased interagency cooperation, bringing together the Convention on Biological Diversity, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, IUCN, indigenous peoples, and local communities, as well as other partners, to ensure the enhanced integration of biological and cultural diversity, nature, and culture in the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. You have also highlighted the importance of the sustainable use of biodiversity in wildlife management, including the contribution of the indigenous peoples and local communities, particularly in the context of the post-2020 framework, as well as the need to strengthen collaboration among multilateral environmental agreements and international organizations in order to tackle illegal and unsustainable use and trade of wildlife trade. Parties, you have noted that additional work is still required to implement Decision 14/7 on sustainable wildlife management and the voluntary guidance for a sustainable wild meat sector, requesting that the Secretariat continue its work on these issues. It was also crystal clear, based on the interventions made, that we all recognize the critical importance of technical and scientific cooperation in ensuring the successful implementation of the post-2020 framework. Indeed, if we are to scale up the level of ambition and effect the transformative change, then we must take the responsibility to increase the resources required to make it a reality. We also achieved an important and long-awaited milestone in the process to describe ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, or EPSAs. In considering the proposed EPSAs described in the Northeast Atlantic Ocean and the adjacent areas, we are now one step closer to filling in a missing piece of the EPSA's puzzle. I encourage Substa to carry this focus on scientific collaboration forward to the discussion on EPSAS at its next meeting next year. Ladies and gentlemen, you should all be proud of your work this week. But let us not forget that much work on the post-2020 framework still lies ahead. The good news is that we are not alone. There are significant resources, ongoing work, support, goodwill among our sister conventions, other multilateral environmental agreements and frameworks, together with the UN system-wide efforts in this journey. These include the forthcoming UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration, as well as the UN Decade on Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. We should try to strengthen these synergies and mutual beneficial relationship. Similarly, each of us must remember that despite our different perspectives, priorities, and concerns, we all have one common goal in mind. And while we often talk about interconnections among various components of nature and biodiversity, it is incumbent upon us to also practice what we preach by supporting and enriching the interconnection among our various perspectives. In closing, I offer my sincere thanks to the Substa Bureau for guiding us through this meeting. I would also like to give special thanks to you, Mr. Chairman, for guiding us and chairing these deliberations throughout this week, as well as those members of the Bureau who equally supported you to chair some of the meetings. I would like to thank the outgoing Bureau members for their valued collaboration, which I look forward to continuing in work under the Convention and its protocol. And I will equally like to send warm welcome to the incoming Bureau members who are taking up this role during this critical period for the Convention. And of course, I can not forget to sincerely thank my CBD Secretariat team, both those you may have been seeing and meeting this week, but also those who work behind the scenes to get things done, for their commitment and hard work that has made us reach where we are today. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Your contributions are treasured and valued. For all the facilities at ICAO, which were made available to us this week, equally our sincere thanks to them. To the interpreters who have made it possible for us to communicate, equally sincere thanks. To all those I have not been able to name, my thanks, our thanks to them all. Finally, my special thanks to you all, delegates, participants, for your passion, for your constructive and creative inputs throughout this week. While there is still much work to be done on the road to COP15, your work has already helped illuminate the path ahead and take us that many steps closer to our destination, Kunming in China in 2020. May you all have safe and pleasant travels, and our warm wishes to you all for the forthcoming holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maruma Brema, for your closing remarks. Now I would like to open the floor for closing statements, and I ask the regions to keep their statements to a maximum of 2 minutes, if possible. So I give the floor to Suriname, followed by EU.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Republic of Suriname delivers a statement on behalf of the small island development state represented at this meeting. SIDS would like to express our appreciation to the chair of Substa, Mr. Ezequiel Benitez Diaz, for his excellent management of this meeting. Additionally, SIDS welcomes the work of the co-chairs, Mr. Francis Ogwal from Uganda and Mr. Basil van Havre from Canada, of the open-ended intersessional working group on the preparation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and pledge our commitment to continue to constructively contribute to this important process. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will be important globally, but particularly for SIDS, as there has been significant decline of species within our states and the degradation of our ecosystems as a result of the drivers of biodiversity loss. This has had and continues to have serious implications for the socio-economic growth and development and cultural identity of our countries. Science shows that we need to act urgently to bend the curve and reverse this loss. This is true for our landscapes, but also for our seascapes. Indeed, healthy, productive, and resilient land, oceans, and seas are critical for SIDS with respect to poverty eradication, food security, and essential ecosystem services, including carbon sequestration. More importantly, it represents an important element of identity and culture for the people of the SIDS. Mr. Chair, we know the importance of filling gaps relating to the three objectives of the Convention and its two protocols for terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Specifically, it is also important to fill gaps in the conservation and sustainable use of the biodiversity of SIDS. It is therefore important that the necessary capacity building, scientific and technical assistance, and technology transfer are provided to support SIDS in their efforts in this regard. We are hopeful that the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development from 2021 to 2030 can assist in this, since these efforts are to reverse the cycle of decline in ocean health and gather ocean stakeholders worldwide behind a common framework. This will ensure that ocean science can fully support countries in creating improved conditions for sustainable development of the ocean, including support for integrated SIDS scientists to build capacity of the islands. SIDS are of the view that there should be adequate reflection of the concerns and issues related to the biodiversity of the SIDS in a global biodiversity framework. Indeed, the goals, targets, and indicators to be developed under the framework must take into account these specific issues and concerns and the related means of implementation. SIDS urges tangible post-2020 financial commitment by the development partners to finance the implementation of SMART targets. It is also instructive to point out that many of the SIDS delegations are small delegations, often consisting of only one delegate. It is important to address the level of representation during these critical negotiations to address the specific needs of these states. Greater representation of SIDS will foster more nuanced and impactful conversation. Therefore, we would like to encourage renewed commitment via traditional donors and others to support development of a long-term solution to ensure full and effective participation of SIDS at COPs, COPMOPs, and intersessional meetings. Mr. Chair, it would be remiss if we did not speak to the importance of addressing climate change and biodiversity. Scientific reports highlight the significantly greater risk for biodiversity at 2 compared to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The next decade is critical and must include urgent and strengthened action on climate change. We must enhance climate ambition and action consistent with limiting global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. At 2 degrees, biodiversity loss is at least twice as high, affecting ecosystem and its functions as well as other negative impacts. The marine and coastal ecosystems upon which SIDS rely will undergo various negative impacts, with coral reef being severely impacted. Mangrove ecosystems, which play a critical role in land stabilization and provide a safe haven for biodiversity, are also highly vulnerable ecosystems. The impact of these ecosystems will have a wide range of repercussions that will be far-reaching and account for negative ramifications on our small island communities and our livelihood. This is about our survival and our existence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Suriname. Now I give the floor to EU, followed by Laos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the EU and its member states, I would like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, as well as the Secretariat, the delegates from the parties, the observers, the interpreters, and the people working behind the scenes, who all together contributed to a successful meeting of the Substa. We would also like to warmly welcome Mrs. Elizabeth Memra as Acting Executive Secretary of the Convention and wish her all the best of success to effectively steer the Secretariat in these crucial times for global biodiversity. And really your team during this meeting, together with our great chair, you were a great team, and thanks for steering us so well through this week. Substa 23 is an important milestone on our road to an ambitious post-2020 biodiversity framework. Science has delivered several alarming reports, and the urgency to act to halt and reverse biodiversity loss is clear. We have deliberated and discussed constructively and productively, engaging parties and observers to provide scientific and technical advice to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group for their consideration. Substa 23 has also tackled several other important issues, including scientific and technical cooperation, biodiversity and climate change interlinkages, and nature and cultural interlinkages. We have successfully completed the series of regional workshops facilitating the description of the first cycle of ecologically or biologically significant marine areas. Mr. Chairman, the results of Substa 23 will, together with the advice from Substa 24 and the outcomes of technical consultations, support the open-ended working group in its work to craft a robust and ambitious post-2020 biodiversity framework to be adopted at COP15 in Kunming. Having said this, we also have to acknowledge that although the topics in Substa to deal with are of scientific and technical nature, they often also entail political dimensions and therein challenge the capacity and mandate of this body. We will engage in discussions on these issues at the COP. We are looking forward to the zero draft of the post-2020 biodiversity framework, and we stand ready to work with you to make the next CBD conference and meetings of the parties in Kunming a success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, EU. Now I give the floor to Lao.
Thank you, Chair. Lao People Democratic Republic is delivering this statement on behalf of the Asia-Pacific region. We would like to acknowledge and congratulate you on your excellent facilitation, which significantly contributed to the successful completion of the 23rd Substa meeting. The Asia-Pacific region welcomes the outcomes of this Substa meeting, which provide a crucial scientific and technical input to our post-2020. We recognize the Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services and other relevant sources of information for scientific and technical evidence utilized for the discussions on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. During the meeting, the Asia-Pacific region countries were active participants and joined other regions and countries in contributing to the wisdom and ownership of the Biodiversity Convention and its protocols, especially on the agenda item on post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We acknowledge the suggestions from the floor on the integration of the landscape and seascape, which include flora and fauna, to address biodiversity loss for implementing transformative change. Noting the importance of benefit sharing from the utilization of genetic resources and traditional knowledge in order to preserve their well-being, health, and culture. Highlighting the need to scale up action on pollution and marine debris, the importance of synergy biodiversity-related conventions, and having feasible and clear indicators for the post-2020 targets. In this regard, we recognize the importance of means of the implementation, such as capacity building, technology transfer, and most importantly, resource mobilization, among others, to implement the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. As such, it is very important to have these resources grow at the time of the adoption of the framework. Furthermore, the Asia-Pacific region would like to emphasize the need for full and effective participation in the development process of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Therefore, we invite international organizations and donor countries to continue and potentially upscale support for the effective implementation of the framework to accelerate the achievement of the post-2020 biodiversity targets and the participation of developing countries, in particular less developed countries and small island developing states. On behalf of the Asia-Pacific region, we would like to extend our appreciation and sincere thanks to the Secretariat for their hard work and dedication to assist us in achieving successful Substa meeting. We thank the government and also people of Canada for the hospitality during our stay here in Montreal, And we wish all of you have a safe trip home. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias a Lao en nombre de la región.
Thank you very much to Laos on behalf of the Asia Pacific region. I now give the floor to Iceland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of Australia, Canada, Iceland, Israel, New Zealand, Norway, and Switzerland, as part of the JUSCANS, I would like to thank the Secretariat and the Government of Canada for the preparation and organization of the 23rd meeting of Substa. I would also like to express our appreciation to the Secretariat and other providers of documents and the assessment prepared for the meeting. The IPBES assessment on biodiversity and ecosystem services and on land degradation and restoration, and also the special reports of IPCC on the 1.5 degree and on land. The information provided leaves no doubt about the seriousness of the threat and the urgent need for effective measures to reverse the loss of biological diversity and the deterioration of ecosystems. This is a critical time for the work towards the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We have had the opportunity to make important and timely contributions with scientific and technical input to the development of the zero draft of the framework, to be presented and open for review in January. The long hours we have spent in plenary and the contact group clearly indicates the importance and the importance the parties place on the development of the new framework. While we regret we were not able to agree on a clean text on biodiversity and climate change, we have nonetheless made good progress towards bridging these issues. The Rio Conventions are intrinsically linked and should complement each other, not undermine or operate in silos. The adoption of the recommendation on this item is a major progress in addressing one of the 5 main direct drivers of biodiversity loss and the main threat to humanity this century. Finally, with respect to the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, we look forward to the work ahead and the opportunity to participate constructively in the process. And we would like to join the others in thanking all the people making this meeting run smoothly, the Bureau, the Secretariat, the translators for excellent work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Iceland. On behalf of JUSCANS, now I give the floor to Belarus.
Thank you very much, Chair. Belarus is speaking on behalf of Central and Eastern European countries, on behalf of which we would like to express our appreciation to the Secretariat and parties for the fruitful atmosphere and the significant amount of work that has been carried out, particularly in preparing the documents from the part of the Secretariat, and also participants for their active work played in the contact groups and the parallel events that have taken place this week. All participants were fully involved in the collective thinking in the process. We have a real brainstorming in terms of approaches in developing the global post-2020 biodiversity framework. The results of this rich discussion have made a significant contribution in developing new approaches and delivering the goals for the CBD in maintaining life on the planet. Of course, other agenda items are very important with regard to Substa provides technical cooperation under the Convention. We also highlight the importance of concluding the first cycle of the working group in the EPSA area, significantly expanding the use of biodiversity, sustainable biodiversity, and technical and scientific cooperation in implementing future work on biodiversity. We're very grateful to the Secretariat for innovations in the work of Substa including the poster sessions, interviews in various UN languages that are placed on the website of the convention and the Facebook page. We would like to thank, of course, the chair, members of the Bureau of Substa, for the active intercessional work on preparing for the conference and also successful holding of the session. Of course, we would like to thank donors, the support of which we've managed to participate in this session. And of course, we would like to thank the government and people of Canada for their warm hospitality. And we wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Belarus, on behalf of Central and Eastern Europe. Now I give the floor to Bahamas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Commonwealth of the Bahamas is speaking on behalf of GRULAC. GRULAC would like to thank the Substa Chair, Mr. Ezequiel Benitez Diaz, for his great work in the planning and successful coordination of the 23rd Substa meeting. We would also like to thank Ms. Elizabeth Murma, officer in charge, and the Secretariat for their work in preparing the documents and facilitating this engaging and thoughtful meeting. We would like to thank all the agenda item co-chairs, in particular Ann Teller and Jorge Murillo, for leading us through the 3-day demanding contact group to review Addendum 4. The mandate of Substa 23 is clear in that it is to provide specific technical and scientific advice for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. GRULAC believes the Substa 23 has been successful in this mandate. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is important to the GRULAC region. The IPBES regional assessment indicates, and I quote, "The Americas are endowed with much greater capacity for nature to contribute to people's quality of life than the global average. The Americas also play an important role in food security as we seek to develop a sustainable way for nations to tackle poverty so that everyone can live in harmony with nature. Therefore, making the reverse of biodiversity loss essential to us, but also magnifying the importance that biodiversity plays in our lives and in a way that it can be sustainably used. Furthermore, there is an urgent need for clear and measurable financial commitment by international donors and capacity building for parties to be able to address the challenges identified by the IPBES regional assessment. GRULAC recognizes the important effort of the parties and other stakeholders to provide the co-chairs with relevant elements for developing the post-2020 Zero Draft. Nevertheless, we would like to express our concern in the progress of the negotiations. We look forward to a more planned and structured dialogue on the most relevant aspects of the framework during the following meetings. We appreciate the opportunity that the contact group gave us to listen to the positions and proposals from other countries and stakeholders. We also recognize the broad spectrum of point of views, but we would like to remind all our colleagues that we should try to keep to the decisions to the scope of our convention and keep in mind that other topics are being addressed in more appropriate instruments, such as the Sustainable Development Goals. With respect to the matters discussed during Substa 23, GRULAC would like to underscore the importance of synergizing biodiversity and climate change into the global biodiversity framework, and also the fight against desertification must be included in order to promote synergies between the Rio Conventions. GRULAC would like to support the discussions on 8J and related provisions made last week during the 11th meeting of the Working Group 8J, as we believe the IPLC suggestions on the relevant guidelines for future collaborations between the Convention, UNESCO, and IUCN from a scientific point of view is the way forward. Technical and scientific cooperation is essential for parties within our region, as it is a key element needed to strengthen our capacity to implement actions under the Convention. On new and emerging issues, we urge the Secretariat to ensure that the process to add new and emerging issues is complied with, so that we as parties do not overload the CBD agenda and are able to give due consideration and review on matters. Additionally, the issues presented are in full compliance with the criteria established by our subsidiary body. In conclusion, GRULAC would like to pledge its further support in contributing to the process of the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We remind parties that GRULAC's goal is for biodiversity and its loss to be recognized as a global priority, especially as we welcome the upcoming United Nations General Assembly's Biodiversity Summit in 2020. And we ask the Secretariat to closely follow up on this topic. Finally, we would be greatly remiss if GRULAC did not convey our deep gratitude to the Government of Canada for warmly hosting this meeting in a cold climate. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we wish you all a safe travel.
Thank you, Bahamas, on behalf of GRULAC. Now we give the floor to Cameroon.
Thank you, Chair. As we come to a close of this extremely important 23rd session of subsidiary body of scientific, technical, and technological advice meeting, Cameroon is pleased to present this closing appreciation statement remarks on behalf of Africa Group that has observed with great satisfaction the enormous effort put in by the Secretariat in particular, as well as the scientific input by all parties and others during the last 5 days of intensive brainstorming, pertinent biodiversity-related issues that will shape of the course of nature and human well-being beyond 2020. Special appreciation goes to the official in charge of the Secretariat, Ms. Elizabeth Marena, and her staff in the Secretariat, and the elected chairs and co-chairs of post-2020 biodiversity frameworks for the wonderful coordination and understanding leadership role during, excuse me, I have problems with my computer. During the deliberations, the donors as well as the government of Canada for hosting us. Chairs, fellow parties, distinguished personalities, ladies and gentlemen, this week has seen us deliberate on a number of important strategic priorities for Africa in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We have provided scientific and technical advice of biodiversity and climate change, aligned with the Pan-African Strategy for Ecosystem Restoration that was approved in November 2019. The discussion of the strengthening technical and scientific cooperation in support of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework put us on a firm footing towards addressing one of our key priorities. We see the proposal on establishment of an informal advisor group for scientific and technical cooperation, including establishment of a global and regional centers for scientific and technical cooperation as an important step in the right direction. The advice that we have given to the co-chair of the OEWG has been extensive. We have provided input on important elements around direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss and the need to ensure equal give attention to all the three objectives of the Convention. Equally, when considering the pathway to the transformational change we want to see beyond 2020. While the means of implementation will be considered by SBI and EWG, we remain resolute that they be considered in the context of goals and targets, because there is no way we are going to achieve the target without the means. On the strength of the various recommendations, the recommendation made and resolution arrived and which we regard to the post-2020 frameworks, it is incumbent upon the African states, as reflected in 2019 AMSEN decision for a renewed environmental engagement, as expressed in the declaration in South Africa, to take its fair share of responsibilities to ensure that the globally adopted strategies are implemented by all the parties from Africa. Notwithstanding, as the process toward the elaboration of a robust post-2020 global biodiversity framework continues, the African group wished to put forward the following observation comments. The group greatly appreciates those parties that have provided the necessary support for the participation of developing countries in Substa 23 and the other regional consultations, the thematic working group, and the meeting of the open and ended working group on the post-2020 framework. We also encourage other parties to support the participation of the developing countries and IPCL in the proposed future programs. The African group observed with satisfaction that the issue mandated by COP14 and the COP and MOBs of Cartagena and Nagoya protocols are progressively being treated in balanced manner. It is our fervent wish that more efforts be made to ensure regional balance in the selection of experts to participate in subsequent follow-up meetings to ensure that outcome of future workshops represent the perspective of every region and in a balanced manner. We further recognize the critical role played by IPCL, the youth and women in conservation of biodiversity, and believe they should also be well represented in all thematic working groups leading in the adoption of a post-2020 biodiversity framework. Suffice to draw our attention once more to the fact that in the African context, conservation measures are boosted by benefit from biodiversity and ecosystem services. It is therefore impossible to have effective conservation without addressing the direct and indirect drivers, including sustainable consumption and ensuring equitable sharing of benefits. We believe input from Substa 33 will need to be incorporated so that the target for post-2020 goal biodiversity framework should be designed or set clearly with potential implementation capacity to enable parties to achieve the 23rd SDG and the 2050 vision, living in harmony with nature. We stress once again the need to develop indicators simultaneously with the target so as to allow for a tangible realization of our goals. We therefore reiterate.
Cameroon, can you make an effort to
continue.
conclude? Can you make an effort to conclude? We still have more speakers to go, and we have limited time on interpretation,
Okay.
please.
Thank you, Chair. Lastly, Chair, the group emphasized the need for a coherent process leading to COP15 that is inclusive, based on science, maximize synergy and collaboration, and utilize a balanced approach. We wish the Chair and all delegation beautiful harvest as we are all lead to the work towards a successful post-2020 framework that will deliver an ambitious, transparent, achievable, and effective strategy that will set the world on a right pathway towards the 2015 goals on living in harmony with nature. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cameroon. On behalf of Africa, I have on the list 4 more interventions from observers, so I invite you to be as succinct as possible to finish. So I'll give the floor to NGO number 1125.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our statement is concrete, but I'm reading this statement on behalf of nearly all civil society organizations and non-profit organizations present in Substa, namely Fundación Ambiente y Recursos Naturales, WWF, Born Free Foundation, Greenpeace, Ecoropa, Econexus, Avaz, Wildlife Conservation Society, Friends of the Earth International, Pro Natura Switzerland, the Nature Conservancy, BirdLife International, International Fund for Animal Welfare, Conservation International, the Pew Charitable Trust, Save Our Seeds, and the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Delegates were very concerned with the lack of urgency and ambition in the discussions on Agenda Item 3. There is a glaring gap between what science tells us in the IPBES global assessment endorsed by governments and the low ambition we have seen this week. Substa has the mandate to discuss the scientific evidence base for the post-2020 framework. The science has never been clearer. The IPBES report tells us that unprecedented biodiversity and ecosystem loss is eroding the very foundations of our economies, livelihoods, food security, health, cultures, and quality of life worldwide. This undermines the development gains that were made in the past decades and the well-being of future generations and all living beings. We also have unprecedented levels of evidence and knowledge about what must be done. Transformative change is essential and needed urgently and is still possible. The longer we wait, the higher the damage and cost for society as a whole, present and future. This will require an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework addressing direct and indirect drivers, focused to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. This needs to include strong mechanisms for better implementation, including a whole government approach, so those in charge of the drivers are bound to act. Furthermore, for the successful development and implementation of the post-2020 framework, it is paramount that the process continues to be open and inclusive as agreed by parties at COP14. The world is watching us. Take a moment to ask yourself, is this the best I can do to tackle this nature crisis? What will I tell my children and grandchildren if I fail them? As civil society and part of this process, we urge parties as we move into 2020 to significantly raise ambition, face up to the challenge, and show leadership in halting and reversing biodiversity loss by 2030 as a matter of the highest urgency and priority. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your remarks. And now I give the floor to Youth Representative 1157.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Gibbon would like to support the statement delivered by the CBD Alliance on behalf of nearly all civil society organizations. The planet is at a point of total collapse. Reality as we know it is changing forever. But the way we make decisions is not improving. You want to think outside the box, but the shapes are all the same. Are you aware of the reality we are living in and the privileged role you have in history? The decisions that you will be making during this process will affect our present and our future. We have been here for 10 years and few things have changed. The trends are exceedingly negative and we are trying to solve a world crisis by doing more of the same. That is not possible. IPBES says this very clearly in its Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. IPBES also recognizes that this is as much an environmental crisis as it is a crisis of equity. We know that you want a real change, but please, please push harder. There is a big wheel called inertia that we need to break. You can do this. Today, November 29th, is a symbolic day in the world. There are two sides. On one, there is a worldwide youth movement on strike for the planet. Hundreds of thousands of young people are on the street demanding their right to be inherited a livable planet. And on the other, there is an event of social alienation and mass consumption. On which side do you want to be? Have a safe trip home, recharge your batteries, and then let's make 2020 the year that the world will remember as the one where we all worked together, where we overcame our differences and focused on what really matters, leaving a healthy, biodiverse, and especially more equitable planet to the next generation. We can do this, but we need to step up our game, and we need to do this immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Now I give the floor to Women Representative 1155.
Thank you, Chair. I am Ruth Spencer from Antigua and Barbuda, reading this statement on behalf of the Women's Caucus. We would like to thank the parties who have supported us in our endeavor and the proposal for a target on gender. Thank you, and we look forward on refining our proposal for target and identifying relevant indicators for further discussions during the second open-ended working group in February in Kunming. We have the responsibility to build a historical movement for the world, a decade that parts the pathway for transformational change and addresses the unprecedented challenges we are facing because of the way we live, we produce, trade, conserve, and interact with the rich biodiversity of life on Earth. We welcome the recognition that biodiversity loss, climate change, desertification, and land ag are inseparably and interdependently challenges of unprecedented severity that must be coherently and consistently addressed. Nonetheless, we are concerned with limiting the discussion to the direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss. Biodiversity goes well beyond the provisions of ecosystems, functions, and services. It is living and responds to how we treat it and how we interact with it. We cannot simply continue to find ways of exploiting all that she has to offer. We need to respect her. We need to respect our relationship with her. We need to respect the rights of nature. The discussions here, although aspherical, all seem to lack recognition of the value of biodiversity beyond mitigation and adaptation to climate change, with numerous mentions to nature-based solutions that seem to put too much emphasis on the carbon sequestration aspect of the contributions of biodiversity. There is increasing reference to ecosystem-based approaches, yet this is not enough. Beyond nature-based solutions, the Met's Chart on Biodiversity agreed at the G7 environmental meetings in France in May this year and recognizes the role and the need to engage with IPLCs, women and youth, and the Pan-African Action Agenda on Ecosystem Restoration for Increased Resilience, adopted in November 2018 in Guiding Principles, recognizes scientific and traditional knowledge, the prior informed consent, the full and engagement participation of IPLCs, as well as the engagement of women. The G20 Osaka Leaders Declaration, adopted in June this year, also aspires to address gender empowerment and notes the IPC and IPBES reports. We should not further perpetuate the narrative of a merely technological fix, but let us reevaluate and redefine our discourses and practices. All new technologies must be assessed with a precautionary approach in order to ensure that their use will not have adverse side effects on biodiversity or enhance existing inequalities. Nature provides services, yes, but most importantly, it provides life, and women are an integral part of that. Thank you, Chair. Thanks to everybody, the Secretariat, and the team for making this an enjoyable experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, last speaker, IPLC's number 1142.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are speaking on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. Indigenous and traditional knowledge, system, innovation, practices, and technologies nurtured and passed down for generations within indigenous peoples, lands, waters, and territories have contributed to the fulfillment of the objective of the Convention. This is supported by the evidences contained in the IPBES Global Assessment, IPCC report on land use, and the local biodiversity outlooks. This knowledge should be valued, given the same respect, and considered as useful and necessary as other forms of knowledge. Indigenous peoples and local communities' collective action should be recognized, respected, and supported to secure our lands, waters, territories, and resources to mitigate climate change impacts that enhance the conservation and the use of biodiversity, thereby reversing biodiversity loss.
Our rights as indigenous peoples and local communities should be central in all the discussions, decisions, and actions relating to processes that impact us, such as climate change, biodiversity, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We are alarmed with the increasing violent attacks against the criminalization of indigenous peoples, women, and youth defending their rights to their lands, waters, territories, and resources. Environmental human rights defenders should be protected.
We are disappointed that guidance on information, the post-2020 scientific and technical evidence base did not reference the evidence base on the local biodiversity outlook or community-based monitoring and information system as a source for evidence-based decision in the decision making.
We appreciate that there is awareness that the contributions of indigenous peoples and local communities should be recognized and that our participation encouraged, but our evidence should also be included. We thank those parties that understand that our evidence and values are important pathways to the transformative change that we will need to adapt to the challenges ahead of us and to achieving living in harmony with nature. We welcome the opportunities we have in this meeting as we were able to speak with the Bureau and made interventions during the contact group discussions. We wish that this manifestation of the enhanced participation modalities and the integrity of the decisions of the ad hoc working group on Article 8J and related provisions continues and permanently applies to other bodies.
As indigenous peoples, we are rights holders and have equal rights to self-determination to decide on our own development pathways. We remind parties that the states are duty bearers and part of their obligation is to respect our rights as we craft our future together. We look forward to our full and effective participation towards the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for all statements. Before I give my closing remarks, I have to make an announcement. A missing laptop, red, in blue bag, is missing. If anyone see it, please tell the laptop to go to the secretariat, to the document counter, please, or bring it to the document counter. Now, I've been told that I have only 3 minutes for my intervention. Y lo diré en español.
And it will be in Spanish. It's several pages long, but I'll cut it short. It has been a privilege to be able to serve you as chair of the 23rd Substa meeting, and I was very proud as a Mexican to be able to serve in this capacity. It's been a pleasure to work in a team with my colleagues up at the Bureau who have been helping me make this more scientific and getting involved as early on as the drafting of documents and trying to implement the mandate of the Substa and not make this into a mini COP. At Substa meetings, we always say this isn't a COP meeting, but we keep acting as though it were. Now, there were a number of side events that were very useful with scientific information relating to agenda items. There was a poster competition. There were a number of presentations to introduce some of the agenda items, and we've been working to make discussions the best they could be. 2020 is going to be a super year, and we're leading a super team together with the Bureau, the Secretariat, and we are very grateful to them. Been working with some of them for many years, and we're friends. I'd also like to thank the co-chairs of the open-ended group for post-2020 for their participation. In particular, I'd like to thank the co-chairs of the contact group, Antel and Jorge Murillo, for their dedication.
También a todos los.
I also thank all of the participants and the interpreters who help us communicate. And with that, I hope I haven't exceeded the 3 minutes. I'd like to thank everybody, and I declare the Substa meeting, the 23rd Substa meeting, closed. Have a safe trip home, and we'll see you next year. The meeting is adjourned.